Hey everybody, what's going on? Rob Cesternino, and we've got a really fun Survivor podcast for you here today because we are joined by one of the great members of the RHAP community that he studies positive psychology. We've talked a few times before on the podcast, and he is back today with a special Survivor off-season presentation of life lessons learned from Survivor. Please welcome back with us. Alec Hester is here. Alec, how are you?
Rob, I'm so good. Thank you for inviting me back to do this. I'm really stoked. It's interesting to me. I feel like a lot of people learn their life lessons from media as opposed to learning it in school or anywhere else. So I thought it might be fun to, get into at a very heavy time in the world, talk about something a little bit more fun and just see what we can learn from episodes of Survivor's past.
Yeah, and what we're going to learn today is that you have specific takeaways that we can learn from specific moments in the history of Survivor. So I think this is going to be very fun.
Yeah, that's correct. And I'd say, most of them are quotes, and then some of them like expand to bigger moments. And not all of them are necessarily meant to be taken. Oh, this quote, you should take this lesson verbatim. It's more like I plucked the quote so that we can gain some wisdom out of it in some cases, as we will find out.
Mm-hmm. Look, I think that people are taking lessons away from, crazier things than Survivor. Okay.
You are not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Entertainment is the easiest way to reach people. So, it's funny. I always say that self-help books do a better job at helping people be happier than like scientists who actually are in this field of positive psychology, just because it's easily presentable and it's in a way that people like to consume it or are somewhat entertained by it. So I think the same can kind of be said for the way that television educates us.
Okay. All right, Alec, so excited to get into all of that. Do you want to give people a little bit more about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I have a background in sociology specifically, and then more of a nuanced view on positive psychology, which, as if I could use a buzzword, is happiness science, right? It's the idea of using little things and taking research to show people how they can be happier in their lives from a science-based approach, not something that is just built purely on inspiration, though, hearing it in an inspirational way probably goes a longer way than just hearing the stats.
Yeah,
go ahead.
And so we've had some discussions in the past about some of your work. Do you want to highlight any of those?
Yeah, so at the time that you and I discussed the last time, it was like middle of COVID, and I was a Disney cast member. I actually just finished working for Disney not that long ago, which was an interesting experience. Their whole motto is "We create happiness."
Yes. Alec, are you allowed to say who you were, or do you have an NDA?
So, well, when I say cast member, I should specify that it doesn't mean necessarily like a cast member is like a person in a costume. As a employee, I should say. I did get to work in consumer insights. So I was dealing with some of the background data that we work with to help. The idea is to gain insights to improve.
You were a background character, yes.
Background character is a very safe way to say it. The people who are Tigger might say that they are friends with Tigger when you work in the Disney sphere. So, friends with anyone in particular, except for you, Rob Cesternino.
Thank you. Okay. All right. And Alec, I know in addition to all of your scientific work and research, I know you also are very prolific in terms of creating content for YouTube as well.
Prolific is a nice word that no one's used for me yet, so I'll take it. But yeah, me and my brother have a YouTube channel called Hester Bros Cartoon Theater, which might seem odd, because whenever I talk to you, I'm focused on happiness things, but our channel is all about reacting to animation and cartoons that people get enjoyment out of.
I see the parallels there. Aren't cartoons there to make people happy too?
Yeah, that's the idea, I tried really hard to make it maybe like as a content creator who could focus on more of this sciencey stuff. But the truth is, people would rather laugh. Even as I was doing research on these Survivor quotes going into it, there are not many that people remember and quote again and again that are just wise words. Most of them are just funny things that people remembered because they made them laugh. And I think that's really interesting. I did want to mention, I'm not a Disney cast member anymore. Now I work in behavioral health research directly.
Okay.
So yeah, I work for a company called Westat in the behavioral health department. So the idea is to help curate resources for things like substance abuse and
Hmm.
depression, um, or substance use, I should say correctly. And, that's been very fulfilling to feel like I can actually make a difference more on the behind the scenes level at doing some of this research and participating in a way that we can get resources out to people. It's great.
All right. So, Alec, this was a monumental task that you embarked on when you first came up with the idea of, I want to go through and, basically come up with all of the life lessons learned from Survivor. I said, this sounds like an incredible podcast. How did you start? Where did you go?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. It was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be initially, if I'm being totally honest, just
Hmm.
because, I have memories of certain moments in mind. The idea was actually to start with some happiness concepts that I think are really relevant, that I haven't talked about before on the podcast, and then try to find quotes that would match up and give me an opportunity to talk about those things in kind of a fun way. But the thing is, you might remember a quote, but you generally may not remember what episode it's from. You might search the internet and people quote it, but they don't know where that is. So, it was just a process to go through, and it was mostly quotes I remembered, and I just had to figure out where they were in the Survivor timeline to be able to pluck them. And we found them, so it's good.
Alec, did you have specific things that you had learned from Survivor prior to this?
That's interesting. I think that for a long time I saw Survivor as being very parallel with life, and if anything, it just sort of gave me entertainment. But I can't say that there were
Hmm.
specific things that I took away and said I want to learn from this specific thing. But I will say that I would be inspired by Castaways. Like, I remember having like such an affinity for Tai Trang and how passionate he was about like bringing beauty to the planet and things. And so I think it's less so specific words that are being spoken to me, but rather characters that resonate with me.
Hmm.
Which is, why the diversity initiative has been so important, because more and more people are able to see themselves in these stories. And I think a lot of the time, Survivor brings that to the table more, or it just makes people laugh.
Yeah. I think that overall, just like big picture, that I think that one of the things that really has resonated with people like Survivor fans for 22 years is that I feel like that Survivor is basically the story of that hard work can be rewarded. If you come out, you can, overcome obstacles that are in your way. I think that probably in the early days of the show, it's probably a little bit more focused on the other players and sort of like the alliances as being the obstacles. But now I think Survivor focuses a lot more on every single player's like personal journey. But I think that the reason why so many people just like resonated with the show, it's that, it's sort of, put forth the idea of anybody can come out here, anybody can do this. And sort of like, if you have what it takes, mentally, physically, strategically, have the fortitude to do it. Like you too can win this show, no matter who you might be in the world.
That's an amazing point, and I think that some of the quotes that I pulled today do point to a similar type of idea. Some for better, some for worse, and it's going to be exciting to talk about them.
All right, Alec, where do you want to start? Are we going chronologically? Are these in order of importance?
I just laid them out in an order that I think would be fun to talk about. And I know that social media is probably the number one thing that points, or that people like to point to as an inhibitor of their own happiness. So I wanted to go to a quote from Millennials versus Gen X, Zeke.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Here is the first life lesson from Survivor from Zeke Smith.
Stereotypes of young people are that they're always on social media, they're always on Twitter, but I don't like being tied to my phone. I generally resent technology. I think Twitter is the worst thing ever invented. I mean, I'm on Twitter, but I still think it's horrendous.
Wow. Zeke, back in 2016, said this.
He was ahead of the
Ahead of his
game.
times. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So Zeke points to a couple different things here. The most interesting thing to me about what he said is that, I'm on Twitter, but I hate it. And I think that that's the sentiment that a lot of people have about social media, right? Is, oh man, it's the worst. Like, ruins my life, but I'm still going to keep using it, and I'm not really going to try that hard to stop, depending on the person. I do think that this quote teaches a greater, more general lesson of just that Survivor kind of teaches us, go unplug and have an adventure. And it's maybe not something that's talked about a lot, but I am curious about what the experience is like for people going out on the island and actually unplugging in the very beginning. And I don't know if it's a thing that I've heard discussed on a lot of exit interviews. But so I guess that's a question for you. Do you feel like you hear a lot that people have a really tough time with like phone withdrawal when they're out there?
I've heard it touched on briefly, and probably like the closest it ever came to being discussed on the show comes from a time before like social media, was really a thing, and even like before the era of the smartphone. In that Shane, was looking for his BlackBerry. Shane, had the BlackBerry, so he could and he picked up a rock and said, "This is my BlackBerry, and I'm sending messages back to my family at home. I'm sending messages to my son." And we've never seen anybody else do that. And I'm back in the first season of Survivor. Greg had the coconut phone, but nobody since then has had like the, oh, here's my coconut smartphone, and here I'm scrolling through Tinder right now. But it is interesting. Of course, I obviously played in an era well before these technological advancements, so I wouldn't know what it's like. But it must be weird for people that go and play these shows, The Survivor and Big Brother, and they talk a little bit about being like, okay, cut off from the world, but that they don't really talk about like what it's like to not have that phone by your side.
Yeah, and especially right now, it feels like it would be way more relevant than back in Shane's BlackBerry days. It's funny that BlackBerry is old now.
BlackBerry's gone now, I think.
I suspect that the reason that people don't talk about it much is that it's actually not as hard as maybe people think it is. And that's just me like spitting a theory out there. But when it's actually forced away from you, I bet you settle into it relatively quickly. I think that Zeke specifically talks about social media here, right? And there's a lot of things that are bad about social media, but I actually think that people tend to underrate the use of social media that's right. And then overrate the use of smartphones. I think I'm saying this correctly. Basically, smartphones are actually the thing that are causing the most problems, I would say. And there is research to back this up, right? Social media, while it has lots of problems, it's very hard to pinpoint it in research to say that this specific thing about social media is what's causing the problem, or even, that we're able to point to this app and say that it's a problem. And actually, my thesis in school was about this. It's not peer reviewed, so take it with a grain of salt, but I was not able to find any correlation with people simply having a Facebook or a Twitter that was causing them to be sadder than the average person in general. Granted, this was for a 2016 general social survey, but apps like Pinterest and LinkedIn, there was a positive correlation for people's happiness. And then for Tumblr, there was a negative correlation. So
really, Tumblr?
Yeah. So what's interesting about this, though, is it's not that these things are causing people to be happier or sadder, right? It tells you more about what is a person like. Because LinkedIn is something that is a little bit more, if you have a LinkedIn, you're taking your job seriously. Maybe you have the time together to be able to put yourself first professionally. Or Pinterest, this is a creative opportunity and I'm able to like exercise my creativity with it. And maybe on the other side of things, people look at Tumblr and they're like, oh, well, Tumblr is kind of a place where people just vent, and that it serves that purpose for people. So, yeah. And so when I say this, the point is to say that it's not social media. It's about how you use it. And something that is pointed out, or not pointed out, but something that's kind of growing science is the science of rumination, and how people who ruminate a lot have much lower happiness levels than the average person. And social
can you
media,
define rumination?
Absolutely. Yeah, good point. So rumination is the idea that you're sitting there stewing on something. So maybe, you see something once, and somebody who doesn't ruminate is able to move on relatively quickly. But somebody who ruminates is going to sit there, and it's just going to fester and bother them for a very long time. And the thing with social media is that if you don't have a healthy control over it, it is like the number one tool to just go wild with rumination, because you can sit there and scroll for hours on end. That doesn't mean that social media doesn't have some really positive uses for social change, and especially for connection. I think that we are very quick to just shout it out as being terrible because, Rob, you and I grew up in an era, believe it or not, where smartphones and social media, they weren't a thing yet. It feels like because it's different from what we grew up with, that it must be the absolute worst. But everybody is going to communicate as they get older, regardless of what communication tools are available to them. So, I say again, it's not necessarily the social media itself, it's the way you use it. And if anybody wants to do something right now that can help a lot, put it away 30 minutes before bed. Because where smartphones are the actual worst is in that last 30-minute window before, basically it makes your mind really active and then you have trouble sleeping. And then your sleep quality affects the rest of your day. And then everything is just ruined. So if people have the willpower to just put it away, it's just 30 minutes. That's it. Read a book, write in the gratefulness journal. We talked about that the last time we chatted. Brush your teeth, do your nighttime routine. But if the phone is away, it's going to go a really long way.
Zeke said, I hate Twitter, but, I'm on Twitter. Like, if you realize that you hate a platform, do you have any advice on how to get off of it? Or do you think that it's okay to hold those two things in your hand at once of, I hate this thing and I'm going to stay on this thing?
Oh, boy. I think that it's a little bit dependent on the person. But I do think that if you decide that it is something that is constantly permeating your thoughts, you notice, you have the mindfulness to say, I know that this doesn't feel good anymore, delete it. I believe it or not, I can't say that I recommend a cold turkey approach for everything, but I think for social media, it really is the best way. Because if you try to hold yourself to a certain time span, you're just going to go back. It needs to not be there for you to actually be able to get what you want. Now, I will say you could probably keep an account, but delete it on your phone. That's what I do for most things. So I know that it's still active and I don't hop on a computer nearly as much. And then that's kind of an easier pathway as opposed to deleting it altogether.
Yeah. I have the app, and you've talked about this before in some of our other podcasts about things to sort of limit how long you can be on, a given app for. But this one, Alec, I don't know if you'd approve. It says very mean things to me when my time is up.
Okay. This couldn't possibly be the Forest app that we talked about.
No, it's not the Forest app. It's not the Forest app. I have a Google extension called Go Effing Work. And then it really says basically horrible things to me if I try to go on these apps when I'm not supposed to.
Okay, this is news to me. Now, do you recommend this to the listeners? Should I vet it?
It's okay. It's probably a little too easy. A lot of times, because of my work, I do need to get on social media. So it's a lot of the times it's annoying to have to turn it off. So it doesn't always stop me. And it's very easy for me to turn it off because I do need to get to those apps from time to time.
I think that's the problem, is every time I've tried to just limit the screen time on my phone, sure, the screen time limit is set, but then I habitually get back into the habit of just clearing it and not even thinking about clearing it. So it essentially serves no purpose eventually. Now, maybe some people have more discipline than me. But as we get into this next quote here, we are going to talk a little bit more about willpower versus powering through something.
I will say that I find that when I've had the best results in my life with, being on social media for over 10 years, that I find that when I am talking to people that I sort of am know or am connected with, and they are talking back to me, that is the good. And when I am really getting into a lot of reading what other people are thinking about things, I feel like that is when it starts to get bad for me.
You're very right. I think that that's a pretty good way to put it too. Very great as a communication tool, potentially. Especially during COVID, it helped a lot of people communicate. Not so great as a place to just sit there and look at things. And I will also say, more on the smartphone side of things, because, we've talked a lot about social media, but I think smartphones in general are worse. There's a great Harvard study. Not that I want to get too sciencey today, but they were able to show that when people are sitting at a dinner together and somebody has their phone just on the table with no messages popping in or anything else, their enjoyment of that experience drops significantly. Which, I think is a good reminder that even it just sitting there, the idea, that our brains are primed to respond internally to text messages that might pop up, even if they don't pop up, I think is as good of a reason as any. Just at least put it in your pocket.
Mm-hmm. What about face down?
I don't recommend face down either, to be honest with you. I think that it's not good to have the visual cue to know that your phone is there.
I get that.
That's my honest opinion.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that is going to, kill a good social time faster than people feeling like you are not present with them because you are in their phone. And everybody knows what it's like to be on the other end of that. Though, we might take for granted how often we can be guilty about it ourselves.
Okay. All right. Alec, anything else you want to say about Zeke's words of wisdom?
No, I think that that was a really good start, and we can put social media behind us.
Okay. All right. Alec, what is the second life lesson you want to take away from Survivor?
Next up, we are going to head to Micronesia, where Suri was on the heels of voting off Eric Reichenbach.
Okay. Eric could have used some life lessons before Survivor Micronesia.
That is for sure.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Here is Suri from that very famous night back in Survivor Micronesia.
My mother always told me you may not be able to beat him with these all the time, but you can always beat him with this. Sorry.
There you go.
There we go. Hopefully that was clear for everybody. I know that was the toughest quote to pull.
Right. That my mother always told me you can't always beat them with these. And she makes points to her bicep, right? And then she says, but you always beat them with these, and points to her brain.
Yeah, and I think that Suri encapsulates a lot of what you discussed in the very beginning of the podcast about what people love about Survivor, is that anybody, they can show up and they can do it. And Suri in this quote sort of explains that really quickly too, right? It's, oh, wow, I basically used my brain, not my brawn, work smarter, not harder, that general idea. And I think that there's a really big myth in life that we just need to power through things all the time. And a lot of the time, if you just use your head and maybe some psychology tricks here and there, you can do a lot more. Mental toughness can go a really long way, and you can develop it, right? So let's say that there is somebody who is trying really hard to just eat healthier snacks, for example. So maybe on their countertop, they always keep chocolate there in a bowl. Just by substituting the chocolate with the bananas, that's something that is automatically going to make you more likely to choose the healthier thing. And that's not because without it, you don't have the willpower. It's more that our bodies run on autopilot a lot more often than we tend to realize. So the more things that we can introduce to make it simpler to make these changes, that's kind of what I think reminds me of Suri here, working smarter to get something done instead of just mentally just trying to power our way through something in the belief that it's going to get us what we want.
So sort of just being able to sort of streamline some of these decisions that we have to make from day to day, where sort of just making things where, you don't have a choice because in the heat of the moment, you're tired, your willpower is gone. It's much harder to make those overpower those impulses at that point, whereas you could sort of plan ahead and make sure you're not in the position to have to be faced with temptation or making a questionable decision.
Sure. And I mean, there's also proactive versus reactive. If you want to be more proactive, I think a lot of people who are able to start exercising after having a really tough time with it report that things like having their running shoes next to their bed in the morning is the easiest way that they've been able to get started, because if you just pick a random time at a random day and you say, I'm going to run right now, there's no routine. There's no kind of internal feeling it's not built into your system, essentially. And, I think that I wanted to share what is my favorite example of these types of psychological tricks that let you achieve things on a much grander scale than the more granular stuff we're talking about. And that in psychology is called the fresh start effect, which, you pretty much guess what it is.
No,
fresh start effect. Oh, really? Okay. So the idea of the fresh start effect is essentially that when something in your life happens that is a significant change, and your environmental factors have been adjusted, then it gives you a psychological opportunity to be able to make more behavior change happen. Because when one thing changes, your entire brain is a little bit spun around, and that's the absolute number one time to make the change.
So it's like your New Year's resolution: new year, new me.
Yeah, it is. But New Year's resolutions fail a lot for different reasons, right? And I think that the fresh start effect can manifest in a lot of different ways. New Year's resolution is one, but I would argue that it's not the absolute strongest one, because everybody knows what a New Year's resolution is. And I will say, New Year's Eve is probably the time that the most people make a change. Even though the percentage of failure is really high, the aggregate number of people who actually make the change, I would suspect, is a lot higher than any other day of the year. And, that doesn't count for nothing. But when I think of the best way to utilize this fresh start effect, it tends to happen the most easily when you have either gotten a new job or moved into a new house or a new location. And obviously, those are grand things that not everybody is going to be able to just do. You're not going to decide, well, I guess it's time to move, because that's how the fresh start effect can kick in. I recommend artificially creating a fresh start effect.
Okay,
by doing something simple, by just rearranging the furniture in your house.
I've been doing a lot of that lately, Alec.
Yeah. So it's funny, before we started the podcast, you had mentioned that you were doing that. And it made me immediately think of this fresh start effect. And there's two things there, right? If you have a cleaner space, it also makes you more emotionally capable to take on other things, because it's one less daunting task ahead of you. But more than that, if you're going to attach other behavior changes that you want, knowing that your entire space is different, that is like a subconscious mental opportunity to take more things on. And now when you start doing these things, you are doing it within a different environment than you were before. And you can develop that habit in a way that you may not have been able to otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that during this time when we have not had Survivor and Big Brother on, I've been able to, tackle a lot of just organizational projects around here. And it is I feel drastically different than I did a couple of weeks ago.
And that's great. And I think, you bring up something that is also relevant, which is just time affluence and the simple having the time to be able to do something and taking advantage of the time when you had it. I think that a lot of the time people get that break after a lot of work, and it's so easy to just sit down and watch TV for several hours. And I get it. Trust me. If you want to relax, find your way to relax. But I think that a lot of the time it's actually more relaxing to do things that are away from our screens. And we just don't realize it because we associate relaxation with just laying down. But it's really good for our minds, and it feels really good to work on some of these things that we've been dying to get done. And then you're going to be more mentally free to approach the busier parts of your life with a little bit more enthusiasm too.
Are there any other ways that we can sort of manufacture a fresh start without having to actually move or start a new relationship or start a new job?
To this point, I think that it's important to mention that, you don't want to force something like, oh, I guess it's time to end this relationship. I need a fresh start. But as far as
good to know. Okay, got it.
I'm not advocating for people just making a stupid life change that is not in their best interest whatsoever just to make this happen. But I think that you should cater to yourself. You should think about what is a change that I can make that I feel like would help create an environment where it's going to be easier for me to thrive. And I honestly do think a lot of that really is just cleaning up your space, but maybe even things like, cleaning up your computer, getting yourself in a spot where your mind's not so frazzled, that it doesn't feel so frenetic. And I think that really is up to each individual to kind of look into themselves and figure out maybe some areas where they might be able to slow things down and take a breath.
Okay. Alec, tell us about the third thing that you learned from Survivor.
This is one of my favorite opening
moments. We can
moments.
all learn from Survivor. Yes.
Yes, this is one of my favorite openings from any contestant. And it is in David versus Goliath. We're going with Christian Hubicki here.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Here is a couple of moments from our great friend, Dr. Christian Hubicki.
Christian, are you surprised they chose you as the weakest male? it seems like a logical deduction based upon what they see, but, perhaps appearances are deceiving.
Christian working on the slide puzzle. They can be tricky. John and Allison on the cube.
Right.
Whoa, out of nowhere! David's had the slide puzzle in less than 5 seconds, and this challenge is over. Christian, the big decision you made was not the physical part, because that was pretty close. It was the puzzle you chose for yourself. Because I've been on Survivor for a long time, and I have seen people try to do a slide puzzle and never get anywhere.
It wasn't really like a fair fight because, like, in undergrad, I wrote slider puzzle solving algorithms, so it's not really. I figured we could go that way.
Before we started, Sam Moore had said to me, "It's really funny that you put a bunch of 15-second clips, but then there's one, of course, Christian Hubicki, and that's the long one." I felt like the context for all of that was kind of important. Because, of course, in this scene, Christian is assumed by the Goliath tribe to be just this weak character who's not going to be able to do anything in this challenge. Well, it turns out there's a slide puzzle. He has done slide puzzle algorithms. And next thing you know, he just wipes the floor with everybody. And I guess the easiest surface level lesson here is to not judge a book by its cover. But I think that's been said 100 times. I'm actually more interested in this idea that everybody has strengths, and it's fine if yours are different, and it's good to focus on what those strengths are. A little underrated piece of positive psychology is this idea of taking the things that you're best at and exemplifying them to the highest degree. I'm going to weigh into the personality test debate just a little bit here, because I remember when Gabby was on the podcast talking about David versus Goliath, and I felt
okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
so
she came out hard against the Enneagram.
And Myers-Briggs,
all of them.
too,
Myers-Briggs.
Yes. So
maybe the love languages.
I love Gabby, and I feel like her and I would be really good friends in real life. I agree with her that these are not all very scientifically valid, the ones that people tend to know about. However, I do actually differ a little bit on the value that I think that they can bring. What I like about personality tests is that they give people an opportunity to sit there and sort of make sense of their identity. And I think at times that can actually be really helpful. I have some good friends who we found the Myers-Briggs years ago, and we just read the long, detailed descriptions, and we felt like we got to know each other better as a result of being able to talk through those types of things. So, I know that they're not all psychologically valid anymore, but I still tend to like them. However, I'm going to go ahead and present one to you, which maybe not exactly a personality test, but I would consider it to be the most scientifically valid of anything similar that you probably run across. And that is called the character strengths test. And I don't want this to be confused with Strengths Finder, because that is a work thing that a lot of people do to be better at work. And I think that there's probably a little bit too much emphasis on working better as opposed to living better when it comes to content of this type. So character strengths was developed as a way to scientifically find 24 strengths that every person has in some capacity, not weaknesses, just 24 different things. And there may be some that you're really strong at, and then some that, your strength level is a little bit lower, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a weakness. And when they were able to identify these, it took years of trying to figure out the best way to present them, they were able to give people the test and find out what strength they felt like they were. And using those top 5 to 10 strengths, the subjects would take the information that they learned and they would spend the next several months just exemplifying only their strengths, forgetting about the bottom 14 things, just the top 5 or 10. And their happiness levels went way up. And I know that it sounds a little bit woo-wooey when I say things, their happiness levels went up. But that is really statistically significant stuff for science. It's, when it comes to the social sciences, even though it's not pure biology, we know a lot about this stuff. And I work with it every day. I don't know if people understand how hard it is to just fake a scientific study. When something is peer reviewed, you can at least trust what the data says. You may not be able to tell what the storytellers give you. But this is really good science. And it tells us something important, which is that a lot of the time we forget what parts of ourselves are fulfilling to us and the way that we decide to express those things. When I took this test, I had discovered, I wouldn't say I discovered anything new about myself, because these were the traits that I identified the most with. I was like, oh yeah, like I do feel like these are my strengths. And, there was one, creativity. And I was like, to be honest with you, like I love being creative. And for the last 5 or 6 years of my life, I don't think I've really used it much at all. And that's what started Hester Brothers Cartoon Theater, the YouTube channel that Lucas, my brother, and I have put together. And we have such an amazing time with it. And, I did that because I realized that there are things I love about myself that I have not been able to put out into the world in quite some time.
Yeah. So this is very interesting because I think about this a lot, because I feel like that my job is a little bit, very like multifaceted of, I, basically have two halves of my job. The one that I enjoy greatly, which is sitting here on the microphone and getting to, talk to people and have like fun conversations and make podcasts, which I really enjoy that part immensely. And then I also have a lot of the other parts of, running Rob as a podcast and, everything that goes on behind the scenes, which I sort of like have to really, psych myself up to be doing, because it is not as fun as what we're doing right now. And so I do spend a lot of time like trying to like motivate myself to, get pumped up and get better at the things that I don't enjoy doing.
Yeah. And I want to like have the impulse to like go farther with this test, because I feel like there's probably a lot that you could gain from it. And I'd be curious, if you feel like taking it at some point and letting me know what you got.
I would love to. What's it called? The character test?
Character strengths. So yeah, let me make sure that people have the correct link for this, because I actually think this is a really good starting point if you're somebody who has no idea where to start improving your happiness. It's a very good base level thing just to get going, because it's exciting. You're finding some identity within yourself, and then it is actually like really helpful. So we're looking at VAI character.org. It's the VAIA Character Strengths Survey and Character Reports.
Okay. All right. And then what is this going to tell me?
It's going to give you actually all 24 of your traits, from the highest level to the lowest. And I usually recommend that people don't pay too much attention to the low ones, because a lot of them are going to be scattered around anyway. But those top 5 and 10, start with 5. And because I know that not everybody has the emotional bandwidth to be able to just take all 10 of those things and jump right into them. But, if you see a couple of those top 5 and you're like, oh man, I haven't really been doing much of that in a while, I think that's helpful. And that actually gets into like another, what I consider to be a very important thing that people tend to miss, is adding just a general sense of variety into your life. I think a lot of us, we sleep, we work, and then we spend our last 8 hours of the day doing something else, and I think that how you spend those other 8 hours, or however many extra hours you tend to have, the more variety you can put within that space, the happier you're going to be. And it's also going to stop you from ruminating as much on the things that are making you less happy, because there's more things to focus your energy on that are not just the one thing again and again.
And so the takeaway here is to spend more time on the things that are your strengths. And so do you feel like that should we just like completely like ignore our weaknesses, where sort of like we're going to get so good at the things that we're already good at that it's not going to necessarily matter? Because I feel like that, throughout my life, I've tried to be more well-rounded and improve on my weaknesses, as opposed to really, make more gains on my strengths.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting that you say that, but I would counter that the point of the character strengths test, it doesn't really include weaknesses. It does consider all of these things as strengths. It doesn't mean that you are necessarily weak at them. And I believe
take a character weakness test.
I wouldn't. I generally like Lena, sticking more positive. But I
just check my mentions for the character weakness test.
Listen, I will tell you this, Rob. I consider myself to be a pretty happy dude, and I don't really sit on any of my bottom things and really think to myself, oh, I'm like really bad here. These are things I need to strongly work on. I don't really think the test is designed that way. I do think it is good to be well-rounded, and I do think that if you can work on qualities that are made, I don't want to necessarily want to say weaknesses, but things that other people may look at you and see as, oh, that's something that annoys me about him. I do think there's a utility.
I'm joking, but it is interesting to say, be a little bit more focused on strengths than weaknesses. And I've heard, Gary V, who I've listened to a lot of his stuff over the years, that he talks about this a lot, how he only focuses on his strengths. So, the things that he is not good at, he's going to hire somebody to do all the things that he's not good at. And he's just going to, keep doubling down on, what he is already good at.
Yeah. And again, there's science to it. The one place that I would caution people is to not use that as a reason to be like, well, my one problem is that I'm a super douchebag and just horrible to everybody. But I'm going to focus on the things that are better, and we'll just leave that. Because I think that misses the point, right?
The test tells you that?
No.
Okay.
I'm saying, man, wouldn't that be something though? And maybe your weakness test that you're thinking about, then that can be an option. Focusing on strengths is a good thing. We could leave it there.
Okay. All right. Are you ready to move on to the fourth lesson, Alec?
I am. This is an interesting one to me.
Okay.
It is Survivor Panama. And it's Nick Stanberry's exit confessional.
The immortal Nick Stansbury. Let's hear what Nick had to say after he got voted out in Survivor Panama.
All you kids in your mid-20s that are in my situation, confused, not sure which direction life's pulling you, and you're just trying to find yourself. I urge us all, please, be hungry, be foolish. Block out the noise, find yourselves, be who you potentially are, and be true to your dreams and what you really want to do. If we all maximize that personal freedom, then we'll change the world.
Wow.
I don't want to undercut his message, but this quote is really funny to me.
Oh, okay. All right.
And listen, I'm not calling
Nick
out here necessarily.
Maybe if we would have listened to Nick, maybe world would be a little different right now, right?
What do you think Nick is up to right now? Do you think that he
I don't
took
know.
this advice?
I have no idea.
It's funny. I realized that I pretty much have 8 legends here and Nick Stanbury, and I find that just rather humorous.
How dare you, Alec?
I actually do think the sentiment of what he's saying is really awesome. And that's that it is okay to not have everything figured out. And I really do hope that when people saw that years ago, they sat there and they were inspired by it, because there's no wrong way to be inspired. Right. It's just that
all the Nick stands, I'm sure, took that to heart. Yeah.
In a way, it just gives me vibes of, that dude bro who just wants to sound really deep in the moment. So they kind of pull something out and throw it out into the universe.
Yeah.
Again, any inspiration.
Alec, is there a life lesson here?
There is. Okay. And it's actually more about what Nick is not saying than what he is. The reason I plucked this one specifically is a specific phrase that he used, which was, for kids out there who are trying to find themselves. And there's a really great quote, one of my favorites, from George Bernard Shaw. And that is that life is not about finding yourself, but it's creating yourself. And I want to say that again for people. Life is not about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself. And of course, that is not to discount like self-discovery when it comes to things like identity. That is maybe something that you have to actually find within yourself. But I do think that people a lot of the time get really caught up in this idea that there is something to be found. Like, all my problems are going to be figured out as soon as I can just dig in and figure out what is here. And they spend years and years trying to find themselves, when tomorrow you can be a new person, people. I think that every day is a new opportunity. Talk about the fresh start effect. Anything can be a fresh start. It could be 5 minutes. It could be this moment that you're listening to me here in this podcast. Could be the moment that you've been waiting for to feel the kind of inspiration that you need to start creating yourself right now. And, Rob, I had a goal coming in today because I loved the first podcast that we did. I re-listened to it this morning to try to not to repeat myself too much. But I did think it was very sciencey. And I really wanted to use today's opportunity to try to maybe let people walk away with something sustainable that sticks with them. And maybe in 2 years, just one person finds me and messages me and says, hey, my life changed the day that I decided to listen to this Life Lessons on Survivor podcast. And, that's kind of why I wanted to talk about the Nick quote, to sort of get that out there.
Okay. Well, I hope that we do that. Well, I think we should link to the first podcast in the show notes. Anything else from Nick?
No, that was really
Do you
all I
hope
wanted
this
to talk
gets back
about.
to Nick and somebody says to hey, Nick, I just want to let you know that your quote from Survivor made it onto a thing, Life Lessons from Survivor podcast.
Just tell him not to listen.
But don't listen to it. Just like give them that nugget.
just
Yeah,
know
but
that
they
it
took
was
it down.
there.
They took it right down right away. I think they did. It was live. You had to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
No disrespect to the great Nick Stanbury.
Yes. All right. So, Alec, what's the next clip you want to talk about?
All right, I'm going to try to catch you off guard again. We've got another David versus Goliath quote from the great Angelina.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Let's hear what our friend Angelina had to say back during Survivor David versus Goliath. Here she is. Here's Angelina.
Natalie, is there any way I could have your jacket? Natalie?
Valid. The tribe has spoken.
Thank you, Jeff.
Natalie?
Okay. Angelina looking for a jacket from Natalie. All right.
Yes.
What life lesson should we take away from this?
Out of curiosity, Rob, where do you think I'm going with this?
I'm gonna guess either some version of, hey, like if you like want something from the universe, just ask. That they can only say no. That doesn't hurt to like be audacious and make a big ask.
I like that one. That's not really fully it.
Okay.
I was just going to say that, like Survivor in life, people are going to do their best when their basic needs are met. And the lengths that Angelina is willing to go to try to get this jacket from Natalie, whichever way she goes about it, I do think is a little bit indicative of how Survivor works, where when we are operating at our like number one top level performance, it's going to be when we have all the tools at our disposal to make it better. So
Right.
Angelina's like, if I'm going to get this jacket, then that's an opportunity. And also, I wanted to use it as an opportunity to talk about materialism and the way that America tries to show us artificial happiness.
Okay. All right. Well, to speak to your first point, that I do think that, from like anecdotally and in my own experience, I feel like that there are people that are like drastically different than when they are on Survivor versus when they are sort of like have their basic needs met in the real world, and people who are just, absolutely lovely in real life, who definitely can be a different type of person when they are out there on Survivor. And I do think that is baked into the show, that they do get those reactions out of people. But let's talk more about the things.
Cool. So obviously, this is not a direct point to the quote. I'm not calling Angelina out for being materialistic, because I love Angelina. She's one of my favorite survivors of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that this might be a fun opportunity.
But let's be honest, that jacket was a nice material. Am I right?
It was a nice jacket, and I don't blame her. So if she wanted it for aesthetics, no, I'm in. Do it. Do your thing. No, I want to talk about materialism because I do think that Americans, especially, probably Western cultures, as we would say, tends to refer to countries like America, like England and others like that. There is a big emphasis on kind of trying to get things to make ourselves a little bit happier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can say for America, a big part of that is because it's literally like baked into what we learn in the Constitution, that we are entitled to the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we
Allegedly,
are shown, we are shown a narrative our entire life that there's these marketing things and they're throwing things at us like, oh, this is what you need. This is going to be the thing that makes you happy. And because we have been primed to think that we are entitled to some type of happiness, we follow that trail and we go the wrong direction and we do the things that are not helpful toward actually helping us be happier, like pick up materials that we don't need.
So this is complicated.
Yes.
Let me also say some things that I have found. I have found the pursuit of things, not necessarily having the things, but pursuing the things to be rewarding at times.
I'm so excited. Sorry.
Chasing the thing, I think it has been powerful, and I think can bring happiness. The pursuit of a thing, I think having the thing is overrated, and having the thing does not necessarily bring. A lot of times, I feel like I have the thing, and then sometimes I feel like some sadness of that. Oh, this isn't as great as I thought it was going to be. I thought like once I had this thing, this was going to be great. But I find that losing the thing is also a big motivator, that it's going to break, or I'm going to lose it, or somebody takes it, and I worked very hard to get the thing, and I don't want to necessarily, I don't want to lose the thing, but having the thing itself does not necessarily bring the happiness.
I'm really glad you went here next, because what you just talked about is called anticipatory utility in the social sciences. I had not come across this the last time that we'd spoken, but I was going to say that materialism actually can also have a really awesome benefit to follow it up, because, and I'll get into this a little bit more with the next quote that we go to, but there is something to this individualistic idea that I guess, like you said, chasing the thing ultimately ends up making us a lot happier in the long run. And, it's called anticipatory utility, because when you have a goal, when you have something that's far away, and you take that present moment time leading up to it to start, doing all kinds of different things. Like, just to be, or to give an example, my fiance and I were moving to Oregon soon. So, I've been spending the last months making a spreadsheet about all the things that we're the most excited to do there. And that's not necessarily an example of materialism. I think experiences oftentimes are much more valuable than a tangible thing. But the materials that are the most valuable are ones that you can get some kind of a use for, whether it be this anticipatory utility, just the excitement of potentially getting it, or something that you can use. Some listeners will probably be happy to hear video games are kind of underrated as a thing that can actually bring about like a flow state that makes people focus and turn their phones off for a second. I don't think that you should spend too much time doing them and pay attention to when you're not feeling as good. But, as much as these items can accumulate and make us feel like we're not that happy about it, they actually do serve a potentially really good purpose. It's just, again, all about how you go about it, all about how you frame it, and how you're able to take these social science lessons that you know to be true and apply them to your life.
Okay.
So I feel like this might be a good opportunity to transition into the next quote, because I feel like I almost went there and then skirted around it. So let's move on.
Okay. All right. Just to close the loop on Angelina's jacket. So that you feel like that the idea of getting Natalie's jacket was maybe bringing more happiness than perhaps the jacket might have brought.
Definitely brought a lot of happiness to the viewers.
Brought a lot of happiness to us. Would have brought some warmth, but maybe Angelina would have found the jacket was, they didn't bring all of the, warmth and happiness that, she imagined it might have provided.
It could have been. It's a shame that she'll never know. But I bet that she was really excited about the idea of potentially doing this. So, look, there's something there too. There really is.
And I think put a bonus lesson in for that. Doesn't hurt to ask. The worst Natalie was going to say was she didn't even say no. She just ignored her.
That's actually a really good lesson in general. You've got nothing to lose a lot of the time by just
the worst somebody can say is no.
Yes, and I'll put a pin in that one because there's going to be a quote talking about that too.
Just throw it out there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go to this next clip, and you want to set this one up?
Yes. So this quote comes on the heels of Neil Gottlieb leaving the game in Survivor Co. Wrong, and Aubrey's reaction to the situation when Neil decides to not give his idol to her at the one point where she thought she might have been able to make some progress in the game of Survivor.
Okay, let's go out to Aubrey at the Survivor Co. Wrong merge.
Neil left me hanging, but survivor's a path you pave your way by yourself. It's like going on the Oregon Trail. You have to ford every river, you have to caulk every wagon, you have to go up the hills and down the hills, and sometimes you get dysentery and die. You have to pave your own way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I remember watching that live and just thinking it was one of the greatest Survivor quotes that I'd ever seen. Just the Oregon Trail reference and everything. I would say the general lesson here on the biggest surface level would be sometimes life sucks and you have to go forward anyway. I don't want to spend too much time on that right now at this point in history, but you know, because a lot of the things that we're going to talk about sort of do go beyond that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we had a really great podcast a couple of weeks ago that, you know, I keep telling people to check out, but we talked with Tim Bertina from Survivor Panama, same season as Nick Stansberry. And that she talked about, you know, everything that went on that, you know, I think most people know that her son, Charlie, who he was a teenager and he passed away in a car accident. And she talked a lot about that and a lot about what life was like after that. And she has, you know, this really, you know, incredible love of life. And that, you know, that she had this, you know, terrible tragedy that happened to her, but she also feels like, well, like I still have to like, you know, live it, you know, I could sit around and do nothing, but it's not going to bring my son back. And so I have to sort of like, you know, that doesn't my mom wouldn't, doesn't she want me to like continue to live, and, you know, and do things with my life. And she talked about a condolence card that she got from one of Charlie's friends who was, you know, also like, you know, 15, 16-year-old. And that she said that the card had $5 in it that she got from this classmate of her son. And in the card, it said to her, "I'm sorry that this happened to you, but keep going."
Yeah. I listened to that podcast a couple days ago on my run, Rob, and I was crying and running.
That I honestly like her story. That was the closest I ever came to, you know, starting to cry on the podcast.
Yeah. What a powerful message by her. Yeah. And, you know, to your point, like for the people who didn't listen, like that is so incredibly worth your time. And it's so hard, right? Anytime that something comes up that is that profoundly difficult, even things that are not that profoundly difficult, you know, you sit there and you're like, how am I even supposed to take the next step when I feel this lousy? And, you know, I think it's really important that people give themselves time and don't rush into it just because they think they should. But, you know, if you don't do anything, when do you move forward? And the way that Tina articulated that, to be honest, like I would recommend people listen to the way she explained it before I tried to do it myself. I think it was really, really remarkable stuff.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to make a link, robswebsite.com/Timbertina, if you want to go back and listen to that episode of the podcast.
And Rob, this is honestly why sometimes stories are more powerful than somebody like me just coming on and talking about the science behind something, because you are never going to feel something more than actually hearing the firsthand account from somebody who went through it. And, you know, the things are going to resonate with you the most when, you know, you're either crying with them or you're laughing with them. And, you know, I have all this research at my disposal, and it's hard to share it in the right way because, you know, the best that I can do is just try to deliver it in a way that can inspire somebody. But when I hear something like, you know, Tina or, you know, many of the other guests that you've had on through the years, that's why I consider things like Rob Has a Podcast, like content creation, to have the potential to do more good than I ever could. Because that's where people get their messages. Like, again, we're talking about Survivor. This is where people get their messages. This stuff can be powerful. It can go such a long way at helping, like, to really make people change their worldview, to get through things that are difficult. And I think the reason that I like to do this, even though like there's a world of sadness surrounding, and sometimes like on weeks like this, I have half a mind to just cancel it because I don't know if it's the right time, but I do it because I'm just hoping that it makes a difference for someone at the right time when they need to hear it. So, you know, man, that's a really long-winded way for me to try to transition into the other side of what I was going to try to talk about with Aubrey here, which is there is no transition. Individualism versus collectivism. Okay. These phrases might not mean anything to anybody, so I'm going to try to describe them the best that I can. So individualism is kind of a cultural mentality. It's very much the type that we have in America, in England, like I mentioned before, where most of your actions are driven with the intention of putting yourself, your own personal self, in the best position to do well in life. And on the surface, that's not bad. Collectivism is kind of the opposite, where your actions are driven with the intention of putting your community first. And that's going to be countries kind of like Japan and China. Now, what's interesting about this is that people who pursue happiness in individualistic countries tend to actually get sadder as a result of their pursuit. Whereas people in collectivist countries, when they pursue happiness, they actually tend to get happier. Now, I want to clarify that this is not to say that either of these places are happier in general than the other, but it's more the mentality of pursuing happiness. In collectivist countries, that's kind of like a liberating thing. It's like, oh, well, because I am supposed to care for my community, this idea of, seeking independence is exciting. Whereas, in America, it's sort of what I started to get into earlier. Oh, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. It's kind of the opposite. We're born with it, right? We're entitled with this idea of the happiness is here. So,
yeah. So Alec, that I just want to make sure that I'm following where you're going. When you're saying that people in a society that is individualistic versus a society that is more of a collective, collectivist. So when you say that they are pursuing happiness, and they become sadder in an individualistic society, how do you mean?
So it's essentially, to use the materialism example, they start pursuing things that are not actually making them happier. They're potentially making them sadder. There's some decent some decent research that pursuing exercise like as a means to improve your body image actually makes it worse the better that you do. And it sort of feeds into that idea, which is, we don't always know what makes us happy. So by trying to actively do it, when it doesn't work, it makes us feel worse. As opposed to in a country where your expectations are low, the idea of pursuing it is really exciting. And where this is relevant in the quote with Aubrey, to tie it back, is that I do think that Aubrey's quote sort of like gets into this, pave your own way mentality of, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and tread on. And there is a really awesome benefit to being in an individualistic country, because how I think about it, it's very high upside and very low downside, in that when we have all the tools at our disposal to be able to make a really happy life. But if we use the wrong tools, then it's going to put us way down there and it's going to make it infinitely more difficult. So, and that's why it helps to sort of listen to the research and fight against what some of your instincts are, because sometimes some of your instincts that you think are going to make you happier, your brains don't actually work like that. Dr. Laurie Santos talks a lot about this on the Happiness Lab, which is a great podcast if anybody's looking to just listen through an entire series of happiness related things.
Alec, do you feel like that playing the Oregon Trail also is rewarding in terms of really drilling down on what will make you happy?
I mean, you're going to you'll start to learn the lesson. Am I being too
materialistic? Did I pack too much clothes? Did I bring enough oxen?
I mean, in the Oregon Trail, you just die every single time. We played the board game. I still haven't won a single time. I actually didn't play the version back in the day. But I don't know if you're going to learn anything from the Oregon Trail other than purely life is hard and you're going to die most of the time.
Oh my
God.
God.
All of the time, if we want to be cynical.
Yeah. Make sure everybody's eating enough also.
Yeah. I mean, is this good advice? Live your life as if you are on the Oregon Trail. I'm about to be on the Oregon Trail in just a couple of months' time.
Oh my God. I mean, Alec, that this is just, you just cracked the whole thing open of your whole life was leading up to this move to Oregon.
Man, well, I'll tell you what, I'll have to report back and let you know how walking the Oregon Trail affects me in a profound way.
Yeah. Are you taking your car and putting it on a bunch of logs and putting it across any rivers?
Oh, no, we've got a caravan, Rob. We're going to just load up the dog and all of the supplies, and we're just going to take it one step at a time.
Dodge Caravan? Yeah.
Dodge Caravan, sure.
Yes. Okay.
We're going with a Subaru. It's going to do well there.
Okay. All right. Alec,
Cool.
let's talk about your next life lesson from the learning from Survivor.
Yes, I'm happy to go to this next one because I feel like these last two were maybe a little bit heavier. Let's go to one of the wisest people that I know in my life,
For
and that is
sure.
Mr. Keith Nail from
Okay. All
Survivor
right.
Cambodia.
What does Keith Nail have to say about Survivor?
People ask me if Survivor's fun. I tell them, hell no. Survivor ain't fun. Going on a cruise is fun. You know, going fishing's fun. Going to play golf's fun. Things ain't fun. I mean, look at me. Golly.
Yeah. Okay. Keith Nail,
Now-
Survivor is not fun.
Going on a cruise is fun. Rob, I believe that, you know, maybe I'm talking to the wrong person because if my memory serves me correctly, you feel the opposite about these two things.
Yeah,
that
I think
Survivor's
so.
fun.
That remind me, the Keith Nail said this in Cambodia, not in San Juan del Sur, correct?
Yes, I'm like 99%
Yes,
sure.
no, I did famously push back against Keith Nail. Survivor is fun. Real life isn't fun. And sure, there are times that are fun in real life, but in Survivor, you don't have to pay any bills. There are a bunch of producers that take care of you. Sure, you don't have a lot of food. It can be uncomfortable at times, but you're playing a game for $1 million on television with a bunch of the most interesting people that a TV network could find. You're on the adventure of a lifetime. It's fun.
You don't have your phone, you know, you're doing everything, living your best possible life. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time trying to say that Survivor is not fun. That's not really the goal of what we're going here. You know, if people can do Survivor, go do it. I would say don't spend your whole life thinking that Survivor is the goal because there's all kinds of other awesome things that you could be doing too.
There's not what is going on a cruise? Going on boats? What you do on Survivor? What's fishing? The main source of finding food on Survivor.
See, I know that on RHAP, your audience rated cruises as overly rated. It was like the only thing, but I love a good cruise.
Love a good cruise. Yeah.
Yeah, but also not the lesson to say that going on a cruise is in fact fun. No, with Keith's quote here, it's more about like Survivor is hard, right? Like life. But you have to balance work with levity. If, you know, you spend all your time on the part that's not fun and you don't spend any time doing something that is fun, you're kind of up a creek without a paddle, as Keith Nail might say. And yeah, the reason this one sticks out to me is because I honestly just think a lot of adults are really bad at having fun. It's something that we loved so much as children. You know, you have most of your favorite childhood nostalgic memories are going to be moments where you were having fun. And I'll tell you what, when you're on your deathbed, the things that you're going to remember are the people. They're going to be the moments that you had fun as well. And yet, so many of us are going through life on autopilot, not taking any time to do something that gives us the kind of like childlike joy and wonder that we may still be able to get as an adult, right? Like, and listen, I know this is coming from somebody who runs a YouTube cartoon channel, many of these cartoons being for children. But like part of that is because these things are kind of positive and light and again, fun. You know, I think it's really, really valuable to put ourselves in more positions where we can just have some levity. And there's all kinds of different ways to do this, right? My fiance and I, we built a jar of random things that we can pull out for a date one night. And we will just
built a jar of things, random things to pull out for a date. Oh my God. Well, Alex, this is a family podcast, okay?
Whoa, hey, listen. I should clarify that I did not build the jar with my own hands. We bought a jar and then we built the words, which doesn't necessarily help your counterpoint.
Can I ask if there are something, could you share with us some of the things that are in the jar?
Oh, yeah, sure. during COVID, one of the things was go outside and have a water balloon fight. Haven't
Okay,
done
so
that since we were
so
kids.
the jar is not filled with literally with objects that you will pull out from the jar. So
I
the
can
object.
understand where you went
Okay.
went
The
with that
jar
logic,
is
but no.
filled with pieces of paper that have ideas on them.
That is accurate. Yes.
Okay.
So all kinds of different ideas, and it really should be catered to the kind of things that you might have fun with. We've got I think a book that will recommend ideas. If anybody's heard of the Adventure Challenge, I think that's the right phrase. They have a book that have little date ideas, but you may not be in a relationship, right? There might be people who want to use this as an opportunity to have some fun on their own, but you can still use this with friends. And, there's all kinds of different uses for it. And this is just one idea I'm giving, right? But this is another thing where we might have a hard time motivating ourselves to do any of these one things. But when you pull it out of a jar, it's basically telling you, okay, now's time to do it.
Alec, I have a friend of mine, and he and I that we have a wheel of different things to podcast about, and then we spin the wheel, and then it's okay, that's what we're going to podcast about next.
See, and how fun is that?
It depends on the week, yeah.
Yeah, probably. Hey, listen, sometimes you might pick an idea out of the jar and it's not, your favorite one that you've done, but you still do it because, you're giving yourself an opportunity to do some pretty cool things. And pretty much every time we come back and we're like, yeah, we're so glad that we did that. We could have just sat here and watched Netflix for a little bit longer, but we decided to get out there. And that was very, very worthwhile.
Yeah, no, this is very important and something that I have really tried to focus in on a little bit more of, making sure that, we're doing more, making things fun and sort of doing fun things and not just, being so focused on what's the next work thing, how do I, set up the next day, and trying to make sure that we are enjoying our time. That is an area that I have tried to, focus on, a lot more in the last, few months.
I'm glad to hear that. And I think it's worth it, right? Because your kids are young too. So they're having fun in that childlike way that to me, kids are a reminder to me of kind of what it was like to get that excited about smaller things and to have a little bit more innocence in your life. And, I really can't advocate enough people just adding a little bit of that extra whimsy into your everyday.
Yeah. Alec, I don't know if this is the right place to say it, but I have found that also for me personally, where I have been, having an adult beverage, I find that also helps unlock that for me.
Yeah,
your mileage may vary. Yeah,
not that everybody needs it, but once in a while, if I have one, I'm right there with you. So
yeah, okay, all right,
cool.
Alec, what is the next lesson to find?
I'm really excited for this one. This is a quote from our newest Survivor winner, and that is Marianne.
Okay, all right. What does my friend Marianne have to say that is going to be a life lesson from Survivor?
Right now, it feels like a roller coaster. The strap is on, the people have done their final check, and the roller coaster just went and it's now just starting to move. And in this moment, you have to decide, are you going to raise your hands and have the experience of your lifetime, or are you going to close your eyes and regret that for your life? My hands are going to be raised, and I'm going to be screaming with everyone on this, whatever ride this is.
Okay.
Rob, I love Marianne so much because she just radiates joy. And
yes.
I think the thing that strikes me the most about Marianne is that it didn't matter if she won, right? She did, but she, regardless, would have walked away from that island having been the most grateful for that experience than anybody else who was there. With respect to a lot of the awesome season 42 castaways, I'm not sure if they would even dispute, the level of enthusiasm that Marianne brings to life.
Marianne, I can't say enough great things about Marianne. I was so fortunate when I got to do the 5.5 hour podcast with Marianne a couple of weeks ago, and she just is so effervescent and so wonderful to talk to. And there are a few people I am very fortunate to to have a few of these people that I've met from the world of Survivor like that. Bryce has that. T-Bird has that, and just people that, I mean, I feel like Christian Ubicki has that, where it's just like, you talk to them and they just brighten your day because they have so much enthusiasm and excitement that it's so contagious.
Yeah, and in this specific quote, right, this is just one encapsulation of many of the amazing moments that, Marianne specifically had. And it is so cool that you get to talk to all these wonderful people. But, I think that she exemplifies the present moment in a way that almost nobody else that I can even think of in Survivor does. This idea to not languish with the time that you have, to try to use it to the fullest. And this even goes along with kind of putting the phone away for a little bit to go have fun, right? I think a lot of these lessons, they end up like stacking on top of each other and being self-referential. And beyond that, this quote is also just about, accepting opportunities when they come along and not being scared to pursue them when you have the chance. And I think that when I think about this idea of, savoring the present moment and Marianne's energy in this, we are in such an era where distractions are just everywhere. And it's really hard to sit down in this metaphorical roller coaster that she's talking about. Put these restraints on, let our hands be free, and go on the ride and just let it take us where it's going to take us. And the fact that she did that on Survivor and happened to win anyway is just like a really awesome thing, But it also makes me think about how people tend to either be past or future focused a lot of the time. And depending on who you are, you may slide a little bit further on one scale or the other. I personally think that the most fulfilling life is sitting sort of squarely there on that present moment scale, but then you have moments of the past and the future as well, because I do think those are valuable.
Well, I think the thing about the roller coaster, and I think that why it's so powerful as a metaphor, was that I recently went on, not that I'm a big roller coaster guy, but I went on a roller coaster with my son at the North Carolina State Fair back in a couple of months ago in the fall. And I think the thing about a roller coaster is that when you are on the roller coaster, you can't help but think about only the present. Good luck thinking about the future or the past when the roller coaster is happening. You are only in that moment.
You're so right. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that it's so perfect here. And, I could have gone with tons of Marianne quotes, surely. But I do love that idea of you don't have a choice but to focus on anything else. So we're going to do it. And honestly, on Survivor, it is kind of a blessing that you don't have a choice but to focus on exactly what is in front of you. And I think the people who get the most out of it after the show are the ones who are the most present and appreciative of the moment that they've been given.
And you hear people talk about this like in a car accident of like, okay, like time slowed down. Well, okay, well, when something, important enough is happening to you, you are not thinking about, what am I doing for lunch tomorrow? Or like, what was the thing that person said yesterday? When sometimes when life throws these things at you, you have no for, and the roller coaster is sort of like the safe way to experience that of like, basically, but you're not gonna be able to think about any other distractions. And so when we have those moments of like being like, I guess in the flow state, when we have that opportunity, like that's, what happens when we sort of like are able to connect with the present.
I was going to say, this isn't in my notes, but I think it's Chikai. I don't want to get his name wrong. Last name is Csikszentmihalyi. Oh, that's it. Yeah. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He's the one who coined this idea of flow. And, there's a lot of good scientific evidence that he has done that shows that the more in a flow state we are, the happier we are. Like that entire moment, because you're not thinking of anything else, there's no time to think about all of these lousy things that are going on. So, yeah, that's why when I say, be the most present that you can be, it really means a lot. Like, I know that it's hard, right? And I do want to talk a bit about like past versus future thinking, because, we mentioned anticipatory utility. There can be a lot to planning for the future and being very excited for it. But when you're doing that in the healthiest way, it's a present moment, right? You are presently using the anticipated future to give yourself joy in that moment. And I also think that the past is looked at the most healthily in this way as well, where nostalgia is something that I think drives a lot of people really crazy. something comes to their mind, like they have a scent or a smell. And then for a moment, it's like, oh, that. But then they react to it and they're like, wow, my life isn't that way anymore. But people forget nostalgia is a present moment experience. The sensation of a nostalgic thought, you have an opportunity to take that and be grateful for feeling it right then. And you don't necessarily have to react to it, right? The reason that that moment is special is because it was impermanent, that it's in the past now. And when you remember it, that's a blessing, you know, a time to be like, wow, I'm so happy that I experienced this right now. And it's not easy, you know, you've got to train yourself and try to catch yourself when you react negatively. But I hope that people like think about that when they have these nostalgic thoughts and be like, you know, that's actually kind of nice. And it's cool that I'm able to have that opportunity.
Yeah. All right, Alec, we have one left to go.
We sure do.
One last life lesson. This is it. This is going to sum it all up. Okay.
Yeah, this has gone by really quick.
Okay. Set up this one with one of, dare I say, am I speaking out of school to say one of your favorites?
You would not be. I left a question for this contestant on one of the last podcasts that you recorded with him.
Yes.
You know, him and I are both Bay Area kids. I feel like we're probably a similar archetype of person. I just love the person we're about to hear from. And this is Winners at War, Adam Klein.
Okay, here we go. Here is Adam Klein.
Then maybe that was an idol. I don't know.
You're convinced it's not?
Is it? Can I play it? I want to play that.
You want to play this?
Yeah, can I play that?
This thing that you can't get off of the voting podium?
Yeah, I want to play that.
So, if that is an idol, it would be historic.
Yeah.
The first idol ever hidden at Tribal Council, in plain view of all players, selected by you and played for you.
Exactly.
That is not a hidden immunity idol.
It was worth a shot.
Always. Adam, tribe has spoken.
There you go. Can I also say that Jeff was also incredible in that moment also. I think that Jeff was at his absolute best. We don't always give a ton of compliments to Jeff on the podcast, but I do want to say that he was brilliant in that back and forth with Adam.
And that quote at the end where he just says, always, I think that's maybe the thing that makes it stick out the most to me. Because as much as Jeff gave him a hard time, you know how much he appreciates Adam Klein as a player, and leaving it out on the floor. Now, you know, we talked earlier, I said I was going to circle back to this. This idea of, you know, just throwing something out there because, you know, it could work. You don't know. And it's interesting to me that Adam seems to have not like loved his edit on Winners at War quite as much, right? I think he's talked about that. And I just love him in this moment so much. It's what maybe my favorite Adam moment because it exemplifies to me in a very real way. And you know what? In the beginning of this podcast, you asked, oh, like what life lessons have you taken away from Survivor? And I was like, I don't know. You know, it's just kind of entertaining. But now that I really think about it, stuff like this does stick with me when it happens. And sometimes I don't remember it necessarily, but like, I think it, you know, on a subconscious level, it sticks with me. And that's just, don't have a fear of failure, right? And I think Adam in both of his seasons has shown that in such a high degree. You know, the question that I had left for him on that podcast you recorded, it was inspired because Adam inspired me on a really profound level, like on a Reddit AMA. He had said something, you know, somebody was asking how to get cast on Survivor. And he said, you know, if you want to get cast on Survivor, live a life worthy of being on Survivor. And I just remember seeing that, you know, so he affected me off the show. And now here he is affecting me on the show again. I really believe, and maybe not just to not have a fear of failure, but when you are afraid, to tread on anyway and give it a try. Because let me tell you, Rob, I was heck afraid to be interviewed by you the first time and also this time. And many, many times over these last several years of my life, I have put myself in a very uncomfortable position because I wanted to give myself a chance to either do good for somebody else or do good for myself, depending on what the situation is. And, you know, I got my new job in social research that way. A lot of Disney people, let me tell you, they are stuck there for their entire life. And you know, I don't know if this, I could like tell years of stories about my Disney time, but, you know, there are
The
almost
happiest place on earth?
You know, there's a lot.
Please, Alec,
Disney...
don't get us sued today, okay?
You know, I'm past the company now. Listen, I actually love it. I have a lot of love for what was there, but you know, I left because I wanted to pursue the chance at something better, and it was very scary to leave the stability. And I think that people are often scared to leave their stability. They're afraid to take risks, and there's a couple reasons for that. You know, failure sometimes doesn't feel good, and it's hard to put yourself in the spot where it might not work out. But a lot of the time, people think it's going to be worse than it is. We tend to bounce back really quickly from failure, like way quicker than most people give credit for. But beyond that, I think people are afraid because they don't want to expose themselves as being inadequate. You know, when you're in a job that you've done for a long time, of course, it's hard to potentially put yourself in one where you're not going to know anything anymore. You know, and it's comfortable to do what you know, to continue going about the same routine. Because, you know, you might not be super happy, but you know what works for you. And the chance of maybe putting yourself out there, you know, maybe high risk, high reward situation feels a little bit precarious. But I really recommend this idea called the beginner's mind. And this is essentially the idea to approach new things with the recognition that you don't know anything. Hopefully, if you're in a class, like there's going to be other people that don't know anything either. And that is perfectly okay, perfectly acceptable. I'm going to go ahead and embrace this experience anyway. And regardless of how inadequate I may feel, and regardless of how many know-it-alls are going to try to make me feel like
Steven is not going to listen to this, Alec. Relax.
Don't have to worry about Steven this time. Well, I have known a lot of people in my life, people who I'm actually close to. They can't help but act like they know everything, even if they don't, because it's a very vulnerable spot to be in to not know. Whereas I'm very forthcoming. I will tell you about everything that I didn't learn growing up that apparently 99% of the world knows everything about. And I am inadequate in a lot of those areas, and I'm constantly learning still every day. But I'm also somebody who has a background in social science, and I have an education there, right? We forget that, you know, again, going back to the strengths, we have strengths. We're good at a lot of things. You know, give yourself an opportunity to learn some new hobbies, to do some things that might make you excited to live your life, that might be fun. These things that you've always thought about trying to do. Like, you know, and if you fail, so what? It's going to be fine. Like, if anybody gets anything from this today, I really hope that you choose to not be afraid of failing. Because your life will be so much better for it. And you know, I love Adam for never having that fear in Survivor or in life, and I respect him for it.
Yeah. Something that I had picked up recently in an audio book that I had listened to was, and it was a business book, but it was talking about how like great companies fail often and fail fast. And so like, don't be afraid to try things. And then when you try something and fail, you can quickly change and learn and, you know, move on to it. Not to say that, you know, give up right away, but, you know, you can always try something new and then just sort of say, okay, well, that didn't work. And, you know, get the lesson that you need to know from that and then move on and try the next thing.
Yeah, it's the variety thing again, too, right? The more things that you can expose yourself to, the more things you'll know that you like or that you don't like, or that you are good at, or you're not good at. And, you know, I think it's a shame that people feel like it is so vulnerable to just put themselves out there for the possibility of, you know, other people thinking they're inadequate, when most people really don't care what you as a person are doing, unless you're on like a really high level and you see it on Twitter. You know, the rest of us as lay people, people are not going to spend that much time thinking about what you do. And especially when this is a positive thing, right? You're not doing anything problematic. You're going out there and bettering yourself. There is no reason to be critical of anybody who is trying to do their best at a brand new thing. So also approach those people with grace when you see it and try to be supportive, because, you know, I do think it makes a big difference when we ourselves can provide that to people and say, hey, you should give this a try. Why not? You know, more supportive friends, the better.
And I do think a big part of Adam's personal story, that he will often mention is the idea of living like Susie, who's his mom, who of course passed away after he went to go play Survivor in Millennials versus Gen X, and talks always about how she had such a love for life and love to dance, and it feels like you should always be doing the types of things that we were talking about in some of the last couple lessons of living your life to the fullest and making sure that you have fun. Adam really does carry that with him in everything that he does.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And it's interesting, right, that Adam, I think, knew this before that even. I believe that Adam is somebody who has always lived his life like Susie.
Mhm.
And some of us, we haven't had a moment like that, and hopefully we don't, where it gives us that kind of shakeup and puts us in gear. But that's Adam's message, right? Is you don't need to have that. We hope that you don't have that. But you can take this lesson and remember that if you decide to live like Susie on your own volition, there's so much amazing fulfillment that can come to your life as a result. So don't wait for something bad to happen to, give you a catalyst to decide now is the time to act. If you are ready to act, not only on your own happiness, but let's just say, for positive social change, for anything that can make the world around you or the people around you better, why wait? Like, start now.
It's a great point, Alec.
I like to think so.
Yeah. I feel like we've learned so much from Survivor. It just who'd have thought 22 years of a reality show? We learned a couple things.
Yeah, well, and I bet that there's surely tons of wisdom from moments that I just don't remember or couldn't find online. So I'd be curious if people want to post and share what their favorite moments are that they remember that maybe taught them a lesson, whether it be funny or not. Like, I'd just be really curious.
Yeah. Okay. Alec, where can people or how do people include you in those tweets? Assuming they didn't get off Twitter after they heard the first 10 minutes of the podcast.
See, it's funny because I myself was considering just deleting it. But for this, I would like to hang around at least for
I've
a
thought
while
about
longer.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and listen, I bet that someday I will. So maybe the follow isn't worth it. But
can I say that it was kind of like I had like a bittersweet moment the other day where a friend of mine from the Survivor community had a Facebook post, and the Facebook post was basically like, "Hey, I thought about this for a while, but I'm logging off. So if I know you, I know you, and I'll see you around." And it was sort of like, oh wow, like that was like, well, that I've lost. I feel like I've lost touch with that person, and I have their contact information, like I could, but it's like basically, I was like, wait, don't go.
It's interesting that social media gives us that ability to kind of keep people in our lives tangentially, even if we're not communicating all the time.
But yeah, I felt like a real like pit in my stomach of like, okay, I guess that that's I'm not gonna be seeing them around here anymore. But I feel like it's gonna be more and more of a thing. That I feel like that more and more people are gonna do that.
Yeah, and I think they kind of should, but it's tricky, right? Because just by making that action and deleting the account, it does feel like it's sort of sending a message that, I've decided now that, my well-being takes priority, and the people who I am close friends with, I believe I still will be. And I'm afraid, Rob, to be honest, because I'm moving from a place where I have my entire circle of friends. I'm moving across the entire country. And, I do see social media as something that kind of connects us, but I'm not going to see them every day. Like, what friendships are going to fall off? It makes you think. But that in a way is like what I do like about social media, is giving me the opportunity to not completely lose sight of them. So I'm not going to tell people what to do. I think that you've got to do what is best for your well-being. If there's a way where you can delete the stuff from your phone and just check it online, I think that's really good. But, just do what feels right to you. It's hard to give this exact proper advice, right? Because who knows all the answers? Everybody is an individual person and they're going to react to things differently. But for as long as I have my Twitter, it will be @HappyAlec1. I will say you are probably much more likely to get a hold of me through my YouTube channel, which is Hester Brothers Cartoon Theater. and I guess through the Discord there, but that's too tangential.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as far as social media, I have a tough time using it for many of the reasons that I've discussed on the podcast, right? I almost feel like I know better. I'm like, I have all this information to tell me that I shouldn't be using this, so why am I going to also be the one spending all this time?
Yeah.
But,
Alec, well, what can people see on your YouTube channel when they go over there? What are you watching right now?
So we just finished up The Legend of Vox Machina, which was an Amazon Prime series based on a Dungeons & Dragons campaign.
I believe a post-show recap also had podcast coverage.
Right, yes. The show that made us big was called Centaur World on Netflix. And I think right now we're actually getting into a new Netflix cartoon called Dead End Paranormal Park, which is super progressive and I think an awesome show.
Dead End Paranormal Park.
Yes, it's about a haunted theme park.
Okay.
And they're doing some really awesome things that's never been done in animation, and I'm just a big fan. So, anytime a brand new cartoon comes out that's popular, we try to do a reaction video to the whole series, and then we like to do some shuffle around some other ones too. So, whether it's adult, whether it's kid cartoon, or maybe like an adult cartoon that's disguised as a kid cartoon, there's a lot of those.
Mm-hmm.
We're there.
Can I tell you, Alec, the latest cartoon to get banned from my house?
Oh, I would love to hear it. Can I guess?
Yes.
Cuphead?
No. Cuphead. Honestly, Cuphead, I think, was very benign. There was really, it was very, I was very worried about Cuphead because I know it was a video game. Big City Greens. Do you know that one?
Oh, of course. I've got a spreadsheet of like 600 cartoons that we could theoretically cover on the show at some point.
Yes.
Let me tell you, there's some good Disney cartoons. Lucas and my brother, have a podcast called Gravity Bros, where we're doing a Gravity Falls rewatch.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually through Brazilian Dragon podcast with Felipe, his network.
Yeah.
But Gravity Falls, great Disney cartoon. Big City Greens, not so much. Not for me.
Honestly, it's not so much that there was anything like inappropriate or anything like that on the show. It's just that
it's just stupid.
My sons, it's like they watch it over and over and over again, and then finally Nicole says, "That's it, enough! I can't take this anymore," and they have to find a new show.
What's Gravity Falls? It might be a little bit much for them.
Oh boy.
But I don't know. It depends on what your kids like. But the cool thing about Gravity Falls is that it's two siblings at a summer camp. And my brother and I related to that. So it might be something that's like relatable for your kids too. I don't know.
Okay. Alec, thank you once again for coming on. I love getting to do podcasts like these. So this was another really, really fun one. I appreciate all of your hard work for doing this. Of course, check out Alec's stuff. And of course, check out everything we have going on over on robhasawebsite.com. Of course, it's the start of July and a great time to become a patron, especially if you're a fan of The Big Brother. We're going to have a lot of bonus content, including the weekly BBQ&A, plus, not to mention the slop and everything else that we're going to be doing on the Patreon podcast feed for Big Brother. That's all at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.